Hello there. Welcome to tonight's stream. It's Sunday evening and I have something to talk about. Um, it's something I've been wanting to discuss on here for a bit of a while. It quite makes up a good it makes up a good part of the story that I'm telling with this project this year. And I thought I'd take a moment early rather than later to discuss this, which really is about health, specifically how industry or how academics involving design, involving creatives, involving architecture deal or go about their health. So, uh, the main reason why I want to talk about this, really, and I'm not a doctor, right? I'm no authority on these topics. I just have a vast range of experience with the many factors that relate to not just physical health, but mental health. And I myself have struggled with it as a creative. And a lot of things are passed down from people that are already industry or already in the practice. People who become your mentors or your teachers, and they tell you need to make these concessions on your health. Not everyone does this, but there are people that do so, and there are people that will overstep your boundaries and actually, it's on you to say no to the things that infringe on your health. So that's why I want to talk about this because a lot of young people that are entering the industry or that are entering a education in design or in a creative area will start to have false impressions or false assumptions on the role that health, specifically sleep, food, exercise, and these things play a role in their lives. So, what really made me want to talk about this today, someone brought up a story that when in their first year of architecture school, one of their professors said, this semester, due to this class and your other courses, you will be getting about 5 hours of sleep each night. And this is to prepare you for what things are like in the real world. That's bullshit. All right. That's such bad advice. That is so poor to tell to some 18-year-old kids that are just entering a career that is the expectation that they have. Yes, there is a high demand, right? Especially in those fields and as you're learning, but that doesn't mean you're compromising on your sleep. And that's what I really wanted to talk about first is this point about sleep, right? There's this misconception that in order to be a high performer or in order to deliver, right, you need to make sacrifices on your sleep because you need to spend more hours working, right? Or you need to spend, some people are like, yo, I'm most productive at night, right? That I get. But you need to be getting, I mean, 8 hours of sleep. When you're younger, it's closer to 10 hours. And if you operate well on 7 or 6 hours of sleep, good for you, right? But if listen to your body, and if you need more rest, then get it. The thing is, lacking on your sleep isn't gonna give you more time to work on things, right? You say like, oh, well, if I sleep less, that's more time I can spend on a project. But the thing is, that time you're spending on the project is actually less productive. If you get the right amount of sleep and you're feeling well rested, your mind has had the appropriate amount of time to reset, and you're gonna get way more out of the hours that you are awake if you get the proper amounts of sleep and you get better quality sleep. So I'm just gonna touch on that point. Don't let people who are your teachers or people who are your authority figures at your job or anything like that tell you they need you to cut back on sleep because you need to answer that's just going to make me do poor work. That's just going to make me less efficient. It's going to make me uh, less thoughtful, less intentional with what I'm doing. You're going to be a zombie going through things and you're going to make a lot more mistakes that way. The next point is on food, and this relates heavily on sleep. Your quality of sleep can be greatly impacted by what you're eating, right? So If you're having to order food all the time, you have to order Chinese, you have to order pizza and all these things, those are all right on exception, right? Give yourself also some balance. If you like those things, do them occasionally, but you really have to be, food is fuel, and you got to be eating things that are fueling, again, what's going to make you a better performer. If you're eating foods that aren't good for your body, they're ultimately not going to help your brain either, right? Those two things go hand in hand. The third element, which I would say if your sleep isn't right and your food isn't right, you want to get your exercise right. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, right? When I say exercise, I'm not saying prepare to be an athlete. I'm not saying, go the David Goggins route and start running miles and miles and miles. Don't, get yoked or anything. I'm saying have a practice that you can sustain for the rest of your life, because otherwise your body's going to rot. So as we get older, our bodies work. At one point you're just maintaining, right? When you're younger, you can grow a lot of muscle real quick, you can lose fat real quick. These Your metabolism slows down as you get older, and if you don't have a good foundation by the time you start to get older, then it's going to be much more difficult to stay in shape. So definitely helps also with your cognitive abilities. This is all things that are bringing up, especially now for me after this week. I realized I was a lot foggier and I wasn't able to focus a lot more this past week in my job or in the content that I was doing, and etc. And it leads me to my next point past these points of sleep, food, and exercise, which is you got to check in with yourself. And that's really part of your mental health. Your mental health is going to come in from those physical aspects. So when I checked in with myself, I'm like, well, why must I be feeling foggy? What is making me what's changed? And when I stopped and realized, well, I've actually been getting about 5 hours of sleep every night. I'm also been looking at screens up until midnight. I've been eating red meat almost every single day. I haven't been drinking enough water. So it's like every day I'm thinking, well, why am I feeling so foggy? What's going on? What's different? And it turns out, besides the fact that I had a cold because Florida got really, really cold, and that kept me away from the gym too. So it's like all these factors have changed in 1 week's time, and I'm thinking, well, what is going on with my brain that I don't feel as good as my job? I don't feel like I'm being as mindful with the activities that I'm doing. And I literally threw a wrench in every one of these aspects that deal with your physical health and ultimately end up affecting your mental health, right? Uh, More to get a bit deeper into this point about mental health, for a long time, I knew that I needed help with my mental health because of anxiety, because of depression. And even though my physical health was in great shape, my mental health was still not. And I put that off for a really long time. And part of it was if I admitted that I needed to go to therapy, then it was like I was weak or that something was wrong with me or that, it's like, oh, other people deal with much more intense traumas than I ever had. That's not the point. Right? The point is there are things, especially now in the modern age, we're exposed to so many hits of dopamine, we're exposed to so much that we're not really being aware of how we're feeling, how we're thinking, how our minds are operating. Sometimes we may be doing things that are good for us, such as good diets, good exercise. But it's a separate issue, right? What therapy is and what studying a bit of psychology is really just gaining tools to help your mind be at its best, to get to know yourself and why you respond to certain things in certain ways, how to turn your behaviors into being more consistent practices, because ultimately your behaviors and the way that you respond to external things that come into your life, that's going to ultimately be what your attitude is going to carry through on a week's time. And ultimately, the attitude that you carry through week after week after week end up forming part of your personality. And if your personality is based on a lot of behaviors that aren't good for your mental health, if you're not being kind to yourself, then you're on a self-destructive path. So, You could be exercising, you could be eating right, but the mind is a whole other entity to exercise and to take care of and to feed and give its rest. So that's the second point I want to talk about. So we talked about the physical aspects, we talked about the mental aspects. The third one isn't the soul, although I will mention through yoga practice, and I'm not a hocus pocus, or religious or spiritual, that much of a spiritual person, but I have experienced that connection between mind, body, and soul through the practice of yoga, through the practice of meditation. Um, but this third point that I want to get into is actually on setting boundaries. And the reason why this is such an important thing, it circles back to what I opened with in this video, where you might experience people in authority, authority levels or authority figures or leadership levels around you that demand things from you or create expectations for you that are going to infringe on everything else that I just talked about, on your sleep, on your food quality, on your ability to make time to exercise, on your ability to make time to take breaks and meditate, or take breaks and go do the things that you need to do to take care of your mental health. You need to communicate very, very clearly that you are not going to make these concessions, right? And I go back to this point because the amount of hours that you put into something, if you have 24 hours in the day, the fact that you spent 5 hours sleeping and the rest of those hours working doesn't mean you're getting good hours of work. Honestly, if I work 12 hours, I might still, it doesn't matter if I work 6 hours, it doesn't matter if I work 12 hours. I feel like I get 3 hours of my best work done every single day. And everything else I'm trying to fill in, you know? If I work 3, 4, 12-hour days, by that next day, I'm not getting anything done, or I'm not getting anything done of value, right? So make it clear for yourself and set those boundaries with yourself first, right? So if it's not doing any good for you to go on social media at night before you go to bed, set that boundary with yourself and don't do that. If you feel tired after you've gotten your work in for that day and you don't feel like exercising, that's when you got to go exercise. All right? You have to make sure that you get that in for yourself. Don't make these exceptions for yourself. Don't make these excuses for yourself, because otherwise that's ultimately what transfers to the external. If you have these boundaries that you're not meeting for yourself and you then establish these boundaries with people externally, but you are flexible with your own boundaries, you're also going to be flexible with the boundaries you're setting against other people. And if people know that your boundaries are flexible, they'll push them. They'll push them as far as they can to get what they need out of you. So that's something I'm actively trying to work on, because although I do set boundaries from the beginning, I'm a people pleaser, and making exceptions is not a good thing to go about it. There's no such thing as an exception. Once you start making exceptions, then people know those boundaries don't actually exist, or they can change, right? So that's really it. That's where I'm going to wrap this video. It's a Sunday. I got some videos to edit from the previous live streams, so I can put out the highlights over here on YouTube, possibly also on Twitch, and have those put out on other media, on other channels. But yeah, for my Sundays, I spend a lot of my Sundays not, whoops, spend my Sundays not doing much work, more so reflecting. I take them for me. I try to not do anything or only spend some time outdoors and get surrounded by nature. So I felt it appropriate today to come on the stream and talk about some of the things that I think contribute to being a creative or a designer who does their best work every single day, or makes sure to operate at a high capacity every day. And again, when you enter academia or you enter the profession or an industry, there are colleagues, there are people all around you, that you see them working extra hours overtime all the time, or getting little sleep, or ordering food every day into the office or into the studios or whatever it is. And it's easy to fall into those practices. Um, don't go by those assumptions, is the point I'm trying to make. And figure out what your best way of operating is, set those boundaries with yourself, and make a good practice out of it. So, thanks for tuning in. I hope that sharing some of these thoughts is of value to you. And I would like to revisit these topics in the future with some more credible information or some actual statistics or actual practices, more specific things. Now that I've introduced all these topics, I think I'll introduce some more specific techniques from credible people, reputable people in the that are knowledgeable on these topics, that can serve you well as they have served me. So, happy Sunday. Have a great week. Make a plan. Get after it. See you on the next one.